With Muslims as worshippers of Allah, why is the way they treat Muhammad not considered idolatry?
If I didn't get enough death threats. I think, and this is just my assessment of the situation, and I say this in Muhammad Revisited, it's one of my chapters in my book, that Muhammad is different from Allah in the Muslim perception in the sense that Muhammad embodies the image of Islam. Muslims have, within the kind of proxy of Muhammad, they have this notion of all of Islam. All Muslims are kind of encapsulated in him. Lots of people believe in God, but Muhammad is ours. That's kind of how I would say Islam sees Muhammad. Again, there's no real evidence I can give you for this. This is anecdotal, this is my assessment. But I think for that reason, people feel much more attached to the person of Muhammad than they do for the being of Allah. I remember when I was in Pakistan, when I was 10 years old, I was going there to visit. I heard someone say this, and it really bothered me at the time. I heard someone say, criticize Allah all you want, but don't dare say anything about Muhammad. Ooh, that really bothered me when I was a young Muslim. I was like, that's not right. A couple years ago, when ISIS wasn't a known entity, a young 15-year-old boy, I think he was at a tea shop, was being told, hurry up with my tea, hurry up with my tea. And the young boy said, if Muhammad himself were here, I would not be able to go any faster. Didn't say anything wrong, but two fanatical Muslims in that room took him, dragged him in front of the city, and said, you cannot say anything like this about Muhammad. And they slaughtered him in front of everyone. I think it's because of that. There is that attachment to the person of Muhammad that's not necessarily kind of proprietary with the person of Allah.
Rabbi, as quickly or as long as you want, tell us a little bit about not the contrast, but the likeliness of how Christianity views Jesus versus how Islam views Muhammad. From what I understand, they really hold Muhammad ultra high, just like Christians hold Jesus, in the sense of like worship and honor. Is this a true statement or is this false?
Oh, it's completely false. Right now, 100,000 Muslims are cringing and they're saying, Rabbi, help us out.
I really know nothing about it at all. That's why I'm just presenting the question as I heard it. So
yeah, so let me just make this very, very clear. Muslims believe that Muhammad was an unlettered prophet. In fact, those are the words used in the Quran to speak of Islam's final messenger, the seal, and the same Hebrew word as the Arabic word. He's the seal of the prophets. But to a Muslim, the notion that one should worship Muhammad, or Muhammad was anything more than a messenger, is considered absolute blasphemy. In fact, if you want to insult a Muslim, call them a Mohammedan, and that's what some Christians do. They do that just to get at them, because that's why, by the way, setting aside all the politics, the reason why is, the whole thing with making cartoons or images of Muhammad, why is it important? Why is this so important? Now, most Muslims hate it, with what ISIS does and goes and kills people who make. That's not normative. But really, the idea of not making any image or drawing of Muhammad is because Muslims don't have cameras. Muslims don't take pictures, family photographs on Eid, on the holiday, and the whole family takes pictures. So how come a Muslim will take a picture of his sister-in-law, but not take a picture of, or not draw a picture of Muhammad? Because they're afraid that people would come to worship Muhammad. That's why unfortunately, these crazies, these breakaway who are an embarrassment to Islam, are so odious. not to Christians, to Muslims. They're going, what are you doing? I mean, they will say that these guys who are doing these terrible things, because the ones who do the cartoons, in reality, they're not only not worshiping Muhammad, they are committing an act of derision towards Islam. But the key point is that to Muslims, Muhammad was nothing more than a messenger, and he was completely human, and he died, and he's buried in Medina, and the suggestion that Muhammad was in any way divine is considered a heresy. And you should know there were, just like Jews, we had our heresies. Believe me, Islam had its heresies, and as a result of that, there was some so-called Muslims that held that Muhammad was divine. And I say there were Muslims who held that. I want to be very careful, because every Muslim, they're not Muslims, and you're right, they weren't real Muslims. These were people who were considered completely aberrant in Islamic teachings, and they were thrown out the window. So therefore, you have to understand this critical point. And I even will say to my cousins, my Muslim cousins, it's not, as a rabbi, it is not my business to stick my cute Jewish nose in your faith, in your religion. But I would say that be careful, because some I hear, they mean well, but some will say, well, ecumenically, they'll say, oh, we both believe in Jesus. They'll say to Christians. It's not true. If you say La ilaha illallah, then you have nothing to do with Christianity. Christianity deifies Jesus as a God. Christians condemn it. The Quran condemns it, condemns the Trinity, specifically those who worship three. This is straight from the Quran. It's just, the Mary part, that's in Christian, and that Jesus is going to return, but he's not going to return as a savior. In fact, he's going to return and then live for 40 years, have a family, and then he's going to die and be buried in a grave that's already been prepared for him in Medina next to Muhammad. That's very important. So therefore, to Muslims, Muhammad was someone who submitted himself to God. In turn, God chose him, and the angel Gabriel, this is the Islamic belief, conveyed to him the oracles, the 114 chapters that we find in the Quran. And of course, there's also another very large area of tradition in Islam called the Sunnah, and this is the biography, the purported biography, the sayings of Muhammad, the things that Muhammad approved of, that he tacitly approved of. This is found in the Hadith. I know I'm using the words Sunnah and Hadith interchangeably. For this purpose, they're not identical, but for the purpose of this program, I will use those interchangeably. But to a Muslim, there really isn't. I mean, if you say to a Muslim, if you say to my cousins that Muhammad was divine, it will be like cursing his mother. That's how offensive that is. The ultimate offense. There's nothing.
Why do Muslims call God Allah? I mean, it almost seems like it's a different God that they're praying to.
No, it's the same. It is the same word. In fact, it's not only the same word. It all comes from the word al, which means powerful. And therefore, there are many names for God in the Quran. You'll find not only Allah, but you'll find Ilah. I'll explain the difference in a moment. You'll find Rahman, let's say in Surah 19, just like in Tanakh. But it's the same. It's the same Semitic language, but it's so close that, for instance, let's take the name Ilah, okay, which means God in Arabic and in the Quran. That word, it operates exactly like in the Ten Commandments. La lecha Elohim achem al panai. You shall have no other gods on my face. So that word Elohim in that context of Exodus 20 means a false god. And Ilah can mean a false god, like saying La ilaha illallah. There is no God, meaning false god, but Allah, the true God. So we use the same name the same shoresh, the same root, which could mean the true God or a false God. So, of course, it's the same God. And I just say it, Christians who say that Muslims do not worship the God of the God of Abraham, when you say that to a Muslim, you are making yourself look like a complete idiot. And Muslims will laugh at you. They believe not only that Abraham was a prophet who was a Muslim, but not in doesn't mean if you walked over to Abraham and asked him what's your religion, say I'm a Muslim. It's an Arabic word. It means that Abraham submitted himself before God. And every Muslim believes that Yitzchak was a prophet. And every Muslim believed, in fact, most of the prophets, the 25 prophets in the Quran, were Jewish. And Yaakov was a prophet. So therefore they believe in the God of many, many prophets, including Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, of blessed memory. And Christians who tell Muslims that they worship moon gods and shmoon gods and all these things, I really want to save you embarrassment, because the Muslims are going, this person needs medication. They have no idea what you're talking about. They worship one true God, and therefore Islam has a unique status and great respect in the Jewish faith.